All right. Happy Thursday at noon, seniors. I don't ever know what day it is anymore. Um, I'm going to review the first four letters of Frankenstein with you. So you should have read it by now and answered the questions. If you haven't, get those in there. I'm not being too strict on late grades because I know it's a crazy time. You guys have a lot on your plates. Some of you. So I want to give you enough so that you're engaged. I think it's good to stay connected to school, to think about something that's not like work or siblings. But I don't want to give you guys so much that you feel overwhelmed. So let me know how you're doing. Okay, letter one. So we've met this guy, Robert Walton. He's writing these first four letters of the novel to his sister, Margaret, who lives in London. So Robert is taking off on this voyage when the novel starts. He hasn't yet left for this first one. And one of the questions was, what is he doing on this voyage? He says, he's going to where? The North Pole, right? He's on a voyage to the North Pole, where he says, I may there discover the wondrous power which attracts the needle. And then later he says, he hopes that he may ascertain the secret of the magnet. So at this time, scientists were sort of discovering magnetism, and how that worked within the Earth. So he's hoping to make a scientific discovery based on this, but also just to be an explorer. He writes, I shall satiate my ardent curiosity with the sight of a part of the world never before visited, and may tread a land never before imprinted by the foot of man. So this like call to adventure is really powerful for Robert Walton. He talks a little bit about his education, in the first letter, but basically we just get that background information. He's currently in Russia. That is where he's leaving from. So he's left England, we can presume, or wherever he was living in Europe, because he's talking about being in Russia. When he's talking about his one wish, I have one want, this is in letter 2, which I have never yet been able to satisfy, in the absence of the object of which I now feel as a most severe evil. I have no friend, Margaret. When I am glowing with the enthusiasm of success, there will be none to participate my joy. If I am assailed by disappointment, no one will endeavor to sustain me in dejection. So Robert Walton is a lonely man, which might be sort of relatable if you are holed up in your house. He wants more than anything a friend. He feels like he's never had a friend in his life. Let's see. I thought I highlighted these things, but I didn't, so I'm just gonna go for it. He talks about his education. It is still a greater evil to me that I am self-educated. So for the first 14 years of his life, he read a lot, but then he abandoned his formal education, read a lot of poetry, and is sort of self-educated. He writes, now I am 28 and am in reality more illiterate than many schoolboys of 15, meaning that he only knows one language. He writes about how he wishes he was acquainted with more than his native language. So he feels a little insecure in that sense. Okay, moving forward. He goes on this tangent about the shipmaster, who's a good guy, who was engaged to marry this woman, but she wanted to marry someone else. So he's like, okay, I don't want to interrupt. So he uses this story to sort of demonstrate the character of the shipmaster. But the shipmaster can't be his friend because he's not that intelligent. He is as silent as a Turk, and a kind of ignorant carelessness attends him. Okay. We see some, well, I'll go back and talk about that afterwards. Letter 3, he writes Margaret again just to say, like, we're taking off. It's happening now, sister. I'll come back to that one. Letter 4. This is the longer one, and this is the important action of these chapters. So, the first thing they see, we perceived a low carriage. They're sort of trapped in by ice right now. Fixed on a sledge and drawn by dogs, pass on towards the north at the distance of a half-mile. A being which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, sat in the sledge and guided the dogs. So this giant being on the ice, a sledge is a sled, pulled by these dogs into the distance. They lose sight of him. Later, the next morning, they're talking to this man whom the sailors have found. His dogs have died. Only one dog is still alive, pulling his sled. And Robert Walton writes, he was not, as the other travelers seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered island, but a European. Before he gets on board, he has a question to ask him, which Robert Walton thinks is insane. Like, why wouldn't he just get on the ship? He wants to know, where are you going? So he tells him, and the stranger's like, okay, cool, I'll come aboard your ship. There's a lot of admiration of the stranger going on from Robert Walton's part. We can see he's developing a little bit of a friend man crush on him. The stranger wants to know what these guys have seen, and he spends all of his time from the ship watching, presumably for this, the first being that has been pulled by dogs on his sledge. Walton tells him it's possible that he has reached a place of safety because we saw him far before the ice started breaking up. So let's see. He spends all of his time doing this. I'm going to talk about some romanticism and enlightenment because we see these both at play here already. But in this August 19th, the last journal entry of Robert Walton, we see the stranger agreeing to tell Robert his story. Dun, dun, dun. So we're getting into the frame narrative here. And the next chapters will be the stranger's story, who you might already have an idea who the stranger is because I've said it, I've written it down, because I forgot that Mary Shelley sort of like leaves us in mystery. But we have this stranger presumably chasing this beast on the sled with dogs who's gotten away. And this stranger is sort of plagued by grief. We see a lot of description from Robert Walton describing the stranger. Okay, really quick, I just want to point out some of the romanticism in here. Well, we have enlightenment, right? He's going on this journey. It's his greatest passion. Robert Walton tells the stranger, I was easily led by the sympathy which he, the stranger, evinced, to use the language of my heart, to give utterance to the burning ardor of my soul, and to say with all the fervor that warmed me, a lot of heat and light metaphors, be looking out for those. To say with all the fervor that warmed me, how gladly I would sacrifice my fortune, my existence, my every hope, to the furtherance of my enterprise. So Robert Walton wants to give everything to this journey that he's going on. Okay. Let's see. Talks also about, so there's this desire to travel, to go on this journey, but also this belief in the ability of mankind that we can associate to the Enlightenment. So in the third chapter, very short one, he's talking to his sister, the third letter. But success shall crown my endeavors, wherefore not? Thus far I have gone, tracing a secure way over the pathless seas, the very stars themselves being witnesses and testimonies of my triumph. Why not still proceed over the untamed yet obedient element? What can stop the determined heart and resolved will of man? So very determined that he will succeed on this voyage. But then we also see this element of romanticism that we're going to talk about a little more. It's called the sublime, which is sort of this awe, this combination of awe and fear of nature. And as you know, if you've taken the quiz, nature and this sort of admiration of nature, nature reflecting mankind's emotions, is a key element to romanticism. So Robert Walton writes of the stranger, even broken in spirit as he is, no one can feel more deeply than he does the beauties of nature, the starry sky, the sea, and every sight afforded by these wonderful regions seems still to have power of elevating his soul from earth. So we see the nature, the beauty and the awe of this landscape that they're in. And then at the end, the stranger cites this environment to say, like, if because you're in this sort of awesome setting, my story won't sound so strange to you. You'll be more inclined to believe the strange tale I will weave for you, starting in chapters 1 through 4. So he's going to go into a little more background about his life, and then we're gonna see him talk about alchemy and science and his education. And by now, you guys might realize who the stranger is, but if not, stay tuned. I won't give it away again. Let me know if you guys have any questions, problems, how you are. All right. Enjoy your Thursdays. Happy reading. Bye, guys. Take care of yourselves.